On this day in history, April 18th, 1689, Bostonians rise up in rebellion against Sir Edmund Andros. Included in the following is an excerpt from the 1944 edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica, going over the history of the early colonial and provincial period of Boston. It is probable that the early Norsemen explored Boston Harbor. Captain John Smith made explorations and mapped the locality in 1614. A party of prospectors from the Plymouth plantations visited it in 1621. It was known to the white man long before a real settlement was made, and there were several individual settlers living within the borders of the present city. William Blackstone, on the Tri-Mountain Peninsula, Thomas Walford in Charleston, and Samuel Maverick on Noodles Island. In 1628, the Massachusetts Bay settlement, the first great Puritan settlement, was inaugurated at Salem, under John Endicott as governor. He was joined in a few months by Winthrop, who, in 1630, with his followers, settled temporarily at Charlestown. Finding some difficulty in water supply, he crossed the river at the invitation of Blackstone, and made his settlement in Shawmut, or Tri-Mountain, as it was variously called. The accepted day from which the beginning dates its beginning is September 17th, 1630. When it was ordered by the Court of Assistants that the town should be called Boston, after the Boston in Lincolnshire, the leading town of the region from which the principal Puritan leaders had come. For a short time, Boston, Newton, Cambridge, and Charlestown flourished in about equal degree, but the excellent commercial situation of Boston soon put it to the fore, and in 1632 it was made the capital of the colony. During the first 10 years, 20,000 settlers came to Massachusetts Bay, most of whom landed in Boston, a great portion settling there. Cromwell and Hampton were among those who contemplated settling in New England. Then the political tide turned in England, and with the rise of the Puritan party, the stream of emigration largely subsided. The Congregational churches, the first in date to flourish in Massachusetts Bay, were the outcome of the Puritan influx. It is to be borne in mind that the Puritans, unlike the Pilgrims of Plymouth, were not separatists. They were originally reformers within the English Church, but when they came to the new country, they found nothing to reform, either in church or in government. Thus, they were forced to create. This brought into being a church almost the duplicate of that of the separatists in the adjoining colony, a self-sustaining, self-governing religious unit. The first church of the Boston settlement had been founded before they left Charlestown under a covenant adopted by Winthrop, Thomas Dudley, Isaac Johnson, and the pastor, John Wilson. It bound the members to walk in our ways according to the rule of the gospel, and in all sincere conformity to his, Christ's, holy ordinances, and in mutual love and respect to each other, so near as God shall give us grace. Under the intent to reform, qualified by the conditions of pioneering, there was thus brought about, naturally and peaceably, a great religious revolution. In Boston, as well as in all of the rest of Massachusetts Bay, the religious test came to be applied to citizenship. In the general court held in Boston, it was ordered that for the time to come no man shall be admitted to the freedom of this body politic but such as are members of some of the churches within the limits of the same. This was at first no very oppressive test, for the early settlers were all of one mind religiously, but it did establish a state church. The church government was liberal. Within this church there was pure democracy. The ministers had great influence, but they were not entrenched as to powers. A sermon regularly preceded election, but it was not to be one in which the citizenship were to be told for whom to vote. And when, in an election sermon, Reverend John Cotton preached upon the inadvisability of superseding experienced officials, Governor Winthrop was immediately defeated. The town was governed by the town meeting system. The citizens of the town met together at least once a year, and usually oftener. There they fixed taxes, made appropriations, voted on municipal improvements, and elected the town officers. It was absolutely democratic. The right of vote and speech on any and all matters belonged to every citizen within the assemblage. As the commercial advantages of Boston became known, the importance of the town increased. At the same time, the difficulties of carrying on the Puritan theocratic government became more and more apparent. There was an influx into Boston of immigration which had nothing in common with the spirit of the pioneers. Self-betterment, commercial advantages, became its impetus in place of the zeal of the early settlers and their desire to worship freely without touch of rivalry or opposition. Not only did the Puritans oppose sects, but they abused individuals. The banishing of Roger Williams, and later of Anne Hutchinson, are examples of personal intolerance. The witchcraft delusion did not pass Boston by. It was a superstition which put its stamps on many communities in both the Old and New Worlds. It was to come to its most ghastly American fruition in Salem. In Boston, there were 2 or 3 cases which culminated in the execution of the persons accused. The notable Boston divine, Cotton Mather, espoused the delusion and argued for it in various polemical books, and even went to Salem and attended an execution, replying to the victim's speech, which had aroused the spectators almost to the point of rescue, and assuring them the sentence was just. In spite of the rigor of Puritan rule, it became increasingly difficult to maintain the theocratic principle in Boston. The colony, as a whole, was not discontented, but it was in Boston that the commercial population made itself felt. They were not impelled by religious reformation, but by clear, cold figures of pounds and shillings. They included able and intelligent men who did not join a congregational church and therefore could not achieve the franchise, nor could they worship in a church of their own faith. A party among the Puritans, which espoused the trader's cause, came to be known as the Moderates, and were strongly opposed by the radical theocrats of the unyielding type. The struggle was finally carried to England, where the influence of the trading class brought about the abrogation of the old colonial charter in 1686. This led to the first defiance of authority in the New England colonies. The abrogation of the charter was succeeded by a brief interval under the presidency of Joseph Dudley, son of one of the original settlers, Governor Thomas Dudley. Then the new royal governor arrived in person of Sir Edmund Andros. He was an honest and well-intentioned man, but he governed autocratically. His administration drove the divided Puritans, radical and moderate, together again. The residents of Boston, learning that William of Orange had landed in England, made common cause with the Revolution, and on April 18, 1689, they rose, seized and deposed Andros, kept him in comparatively easy confinement for nearly a year, and sent him back to England. A new charter was granted by William. It assured the colonies in their liberties and freedom of worship, but it protected the English churchmen in their right of worship and extended the franchise so that it no longer rested on church membership. The election of governor was never restored to the people while under English rule. Under the provincial charter, which approximately began in the 18th century, Boston and Massachusetts history are closely interwoven. In the middle of the 18th century, the population was about 15,000. The houses were principally of wood, some of brick and stone. The town maintained a town watch and an organization of fire wards, but it suffered from destructive fires in 1676, 1690, 1711, 1747, and 1760. The town had 17 churches in 1750, the larger number being congregational, but there were other denominations represented as well: Episcopal, Anabaptist, French Huguenot, and Quaker. Although the religious test had been abolished for suffrage, the town continued to make money grants to the congregational churches and foster them officially.